Hey y'all, you're listening to
Two Wives and a Spark.
As an interracial couple, we've learned a lot over the years, and we're committed to sparking conversations that build community and explore how race influences everything. Literally everything. So that's our focus for this podcast.
Because we believe that intentional conversations are vehicles for change. We've seen the power of them in our relationship over the years, and we know that when we really listen to each other and to ourselves, we see the truth in new and revealing ways.
I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
You're listening to Two Wives and a Spark. Hey y'all, welcome to episode 7. We are so excited to be back with you. In this week's episode, we are going to be speaking to you all about the power of pausing, giving yourself space to process, giving yourself space to be with your thoughts. We've been doing a lot of processing ourselves, especially as we're hearing from you all, our listeners, and getting your feedback and questions and wonderings. And you all have been doing a great job of sharing back to us what you're learning from the episodes. And that has caused us to sit back and do some learning ourselves around what we're putting out into the world and to think about our stories and experiences. And so we've been giving ourselves a lot of time to just be with our thoughts. So this week's quote is going to be all about the power of our thoughts. It is from the wonderful Bishop T.D. Jakes. Bishop says, "I must incubate them in the womb of my mind before I birth them through the canal of my mouth. Once a thought is birthed, you can't always retract it. A sorry doesn't always work." Woo, y'all. Incubate them in the womb of my mind. When you think of the womb, a space that is sacred, that gave us life, where we were present and working for 9 months to become these human beings that we are, it is not a settled thought when you think about letting your thoughts incubate in your womb of your mind. Woo, babe, that one is speaking to my soul.
Power of when you choose. I think this connects to so much of what we've talked about here is just the power of our choices, and the power of when you deliberately let a thought become words and this idea of the metaphor of the canal of my mouth. Once that thought is birthed, you can't take it back. The power of language and the power of our words and our thoughts in this work can't be underscored enough. And it's a little bit of a spiritual beginning with connecting to this quote, but this work is spiritual for us. And we want to open that up for this week because there is been a lot going on these past 3 weeks.
There has been a lot going on. And I think I will be honest with you all, audience. Today was our last day for myself at school with children. I'm still working as an admin. It has been a year of movement, a year of action, a year of go, 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 green light, green light, green light, green light. A year where I haven't taken as much necessary pause, I think, to really allow my spirit, my soul, my energy to be rejuvenated, refreshed, held, healed, taken care of. It has been a year of holding space. I think this is speaking to me because I haven't quieted my mind in quite a while, actually. So really giving myself permission with purpose to give my mind a minute to really think about what just happened in the world, what is happening around me. What did I just put my body mentally and physically through? Giving myself space to process that and to pause while I process that. Not to process and talk about it out loud, but to really give myself the space to pause and process it. That's what I plan on doing over the summer. But of course, I wanted to share that with you all first.
It's arguably one of the most challenging academic years in recorded history for schools. So there are so many layers of the challenges and the chaos and the uncertainty and the volatility, compounding challenges coming from, of course, the global pandemic. And then you have all the instances of racial injustice and police brutality, and then you have gun violence, and you have regular community trauma. There's so many compounding stressors of this past year that I think it all kind of bubbled up and was boiling over these past couple weeks for us. We were finding, just in full transparency, the reason we're calling this episode Around Processing is because we've recorded episode 7 3 different times over the course of these past couple weekends. Usually we record on our Saturday morning. We have like a Saturday morning ritual.
Yeah.
In the past couple of Saturdays, something's been off. And I think both are just, we have so much on our plates professionally and a lot going on personally. And I think the insight from these past couple weeks has been you can't rush the process. You can have the perfect plan because we had all the episodes all planned out. And
Yeah.
we had titles for each episode
Yeah.
and we recorded the originally intended or episode. Something's a little bit off.
Mhm.
And then we tried a new one. We went back to the drawing board. Okay, let's try this one. And we recorded that one. And something was still off.
Mhm.
And it was because I think we were too attached to the plan and we weren't tapping into our intuition as much.
One of the things people have shared with us about this podcast they enjoy is our stories. And we weren't, I don't think, doing a good job of authentically sharing our truths in the episodes that we were recording or connecting it to our experiences and our stories. And so we were struggling with letting that be released. The story that we're sharing with you all is we are fumbling and giving ourselves permission to sit in the stickiness of that. We are not acing it.
Because I think actually this is the lesson for the week. When you get out of your own way, I think now we are in alignment. It's not about acing it. We were out of alignment these past couple of weeks because I think it's so emblematic of this work. I think that we feel a sense of urgency. We have all these plans. We know this work is vital and it's life and death. And so we push and we have these important intellectual topics that we think we need to cover. On an emotional front, we were maxed out. We didn't have the
Right,
bandwidth.
right,
And
right.
so I think I'm proud of us for stepping back and saying, hey, for knowing that we at least know our intuition enough to say something was out of alignment. Let's go back to the drawing board and let's not just release it just because, which I think it's emblematic for this work because with racial equity work, racial justice work, there is a lot of urgency. And there are some times where you feel the pressure to deliver or to share or to put something out there. But if it's not deeply and authentically aligned with where you're at, sometimes the better thing to do is to pause and talk about what's up for you in that moment.
You use a really good word. There's urgency. And I think there is urgency around the fact that people's lives are at risk. But if the urgency that you are feeling is more so to the point of, I have to make sure I say something out loud right now because people are watching me, that has nothing to do with somebody's life being taken. That has more to do with your ego. I think remembering that piece and being really clear with ourselves about being ego distant from the ego voice and letting ourselves really let our thoughts incubate, really let our thoughts work themselves out, which means we have to make space for them.
Yes.
And we had
no
no space, but we didn't really realize that until we sat down to record. That's not the energy we've ever gone into any projects with. And so I think because we have those foundational pieces in our relationship already, it is easier for us to know, to your point around alignment, when we are out of alignment. We do things with joy and love and care and kindness. And when that can't show up, that means there's a blockage.
I think we were doing those recordings with joy and love and kindness and that, but I think something was still off. Sometimes you don't even have the words for it. Something is off and I don't know what it is. We were exhausted. This comes down to basic need. We were probably not getting enough sleep. One day we were in here recording and you hadn't eaten, hadn't drank water. There were some basic things that in hindsight, it's hilarious to think that's how much we were pushing ourselves that we didn't even see it. I love when I look back and I just can laugh at myself. Like you thought that in that 2-hour block, you could do all these things, X, Y, and Z. And I think there's just sometimes we need spaciousness for this work.
Now I will speak for myself. I know I lacked joy because there's no way I was in here hangry and joyful. The other key thing I think here is accepting when you yourself as an individual need to pause. I think we have quite a few listeners who are leaning into these conversations in ways that they hadn't yet thought of. And that means whether there's this new episode or not, work is still happening, whether we are recording an episode or not. And that is actually the point. And that brings me joy for sure. That brings me joy to even just know that as we sit down recording this episode, because I had some time to think about what have I been hearing from folks? What are people saying? And really reading the messages and listening to the messages that people have been leaving. And that has been really helpful to get rejuvenated, even while still tired. joyfully tired. I am
Mm.
skipping.
No, I think that's a really good point. I think some of the takeaways from these past couple weeks would be conditions matter. When we're doing this work as a metaphor, doing
Mhm.
racial equity work, racial harmony, racial justice, doing this work in service of these things, conditions matter.
100%. Your personal conditions matter, like
Mhm.
individually, your conditions matter. And then collectively, when doing work in community, the conditions to be in community together matters. You were saying you weren't feeling a lack of joy or X, Y, or Z, but I didn't come into the space being like, oh, I didn't eat. Me individually taking care of my needs matters before we come into a shared space. And then in that shared space, having some way of knowing and connecting with each other to know that everyone's needs have been met
Right.
before trying to work on a complex or even a simple situation together.
Think about how different the work would have been. There were basic needs that weren't met for you, but for me, I was really distracted and I was
Mm,
really
mhm,
tired. Like I
mhm,
hadn't slept really well and I had a lot on my mind.
mhm,
And so being distracted wasn't good for me.
mhm,
And we were both trying to push through. And
mhm.
had we just taken a pause and said, let's just check in. How are you doing?
After we allowed our stubbornness to be in the driver's seat for too long, then we checked in. We ran out of
Yeah.
gas.
I'm thankful that we're so reflective. Older versions of myself, I would have gotten frustrated when it didn't work out. I think we can get attached to plans and we can get a little bit frustrated when things don't work out. And you think time is the most precious resource. So you give 4 hours to something over the course of 3 weeks and then it still hasn't produced the thing that you thought it was supposed to. That would have been my old version reflection. This version of me in this moment can see, wow, what a gift. Those 4 hours taught us this lesson that we get to talk about right now.
And that we get to then become more aware of. I think it's not even just being aware of it right now, but moving forward, taking those lessons in and knowing, okay, we've done this enough times to now be more aware of what makes me excited in this space, what hinders my excitement in this space, and being clear with each other about that and feeling safe enough to not just push through. It's better, I think, to pause and say, okay, we ready? We on the same page? We got everything? Okay, let's do
Mhm,
this. And
mhm.
not just, okay, well you gonna write that down and I'll be ready when we jump in, which we've done some episodes that way too. And I think that's fine, but I think we're learning that actually doesn't work for both of us. To you all listening, one of the my takeaways for the last couple of weeks has been really taking space to learn from what is feeding me and what isn't, what's
Mhm,
nurturing me and what isn't. That's a big takeaway for me. And I think you know better, you do better.
mhm,
And we know better now. So we're
mhm.
going to continue to move forward with doing better.
The other takeaway that I had, even though in the moment it did feel a little bit frustrating when we weren't
Mhm.
finding the space. Being out of alignment doesn't feel good. You
Right.
know when you're there. So
Right.
we were like, oh, something's off. But now I can look back at it without frustration. I can truly see it because I think we've practiced enough trusting each other and listening to each other and hearing if the other person says something off, then there's no question. What are we going to do? But I think we've learned that that's a muscle that we've practiced over
Right.
time, not
Right.
putting our own needs first. If you lift it up and kind of compare this to doing the work, some people, the work looks like being a part of activist groups or coalitions. Other people are showing up to protest. Other people are doing book clubs and facilitating discussions in their communities. Other
Mhm.
folks are doing the work at school and having dialogue about unconscious bias and racial equity. So everybody's work looks different. Sometimes there is a moment to pause if there's the book club and something feels off, or you're in multiple book clubs and you're doing all these things because you feel it's the right thing to do, but this is the moment when I think I've learned, especially this past week, trusting your intuition and knowing when something is either too much or not right is rejecting white supremacy culture. I think white supremacy culture conditions us to keep us pushing and feeling that urgency and moving and privileging kind of either or thinking and compartmentalizing and not slowing down to be emotional beings first and touching in with ourselves and each other across difference around the impact of the emotional toll. And so I think there's also a layer of this that I'm learning to understand about what it means to really reject the conditioning of white supremacy culture because it's
Mhm.
very insidious. It
Mhm.
shows up in very subtle ways.
I
Yeah.
think that's why the power of knowing your why is
Mhm.
so important. You will get to this place where lists start to happen, where you start to gotta go to that event and I gotta, read this book and I gotta post that and I gotta talk to this friend and I gotta go to this live and all these things. And then it'll start happening. And before you know it, you've gotten further away from the reason why you got into becoming more aware in the first place. And I think in our society, we are surrounded by noise. We
Mhm.
are surrounded by distractions. We are surrounded by staying busy.
Mhm.
And so we actually have to be intentional about taking breaks and moments to pause. We have to take a moment to sit back and go back to the why.
Mhm.
What was my reasoning when I first got in this? What was it that got you to switch into a knowing phase and then an action phase?
Mm.
And how do you constantly come back to that to know if you are being honest with yourself and
Mm.
listening to yourself, not just listening to the people around you and all the noise around you, but back to self? Because when you go back to self, you can't be stopped. When you go back to self and you give yourself a minute to really be with your thoughts, to really be with your ideas, to really be with your heart space,
Mhm.
then power happens. But if
Yeah.
you're just navigating the world because following the person in front of you or the person that posted over here to the left, you might make something delicious, but you also might make something that's not going to last super long. Giving ourselves this opportunity to really, really be in a pause
Mm.
and think about our purpose and our why and think about what we're putting out into the world and what it's going to cause in the world
Mhm.
and how it will make the world a better place or not, really thinking through that and grappling with that and giving space for that. And we need permission these days to do that. And we also need practices to do it.
Giving ourselves permission to even notice, to observe and pay attention to what are my current practices? Am I checking boxes and do I have this list of things I feel like I should do? Am I shoulding through the day or am I actually thinking about this is deeply connected to my why? This is I trust myself and my intuition enough to know that it's okay to slow down right now in
Mhm.
service of the collective good, recognizing what's a distraction and what's an aligned action takes a lot of work and we're literally doing this in real time.
I think it does take a lot of work, but I think I've noticed trusting your gut. And always for years, I keep a journal next to my bed. Does the journal always get written in? No. Is it always, though, next to my bed? Utilizing it this week as a tool of release. I will tell myself often, you're tired, so just go to bed instead of journaling. I have journaled every night this week, tired or not, and then it has allowed me to go to bed quickly. And I know this, which is why it's always by my bed, but I will resist the practice that's going to give me my need because it almost feels like it is more work to give myself what I need than it is to just kind of stay in this rat race. We actually, in our guts, know the things we need, but we
Mhm.
push them further away for whatever reason. Whatever the thing is in your life that you're looking at and resisting, it's probably the thing you need. Maybe that'll be different for me in a month.
I think there's seeing something that you think you want, but feeling resistance. And then there's also noticing where you genuinely feel resistance and what you're doing.
Yeah,
These are
that's
probably
a
the
good point.
big two takeaways. One is what are the things that you know are good for you, but you're avoiding because they feel like work. And so you take it to the next level on the racial equity, racial harmony, racial justice front. What are the things looking at that book you've told people you're going to read and you haven't started yet?
Right,
Or seeing that group that you've really wanted to go to, but you feel it's hard to be a newcomer again
right.
in another space. So
Yeah,
there are different ways that this resistance shows up. And
yeah,
so I think we're just learning and practicing the act of staying curious with it and noticing because there's so many different types of resistance. And I think what we've learned from these past couple weeks is the resistance we were feeling really was connected to something being out of alignment.
correct.
So we invite you all to join us in noticing what on your plate is causing you to feel a little bit of lack of alignment or something that just feels off when it comes to your practices for this work. And what are you noticing about your practices and where you're feeling energized and excited and where you're feeling kind of drained and resistance?
Those are some good hints to
Mhm.
yourself.
What did this past couple weeks teach us? Sometimes with these pauses, we learn to make some mid flight adjustments. We
Hmm.
learn to say, okay, there's actually something different that I need.
Hmm.
What did we determine the other day about what might be most helpful for us on this journey.
We have decided that we are going to give ourselves some space to incubate our thoughts and before they come out off the tongue. This is going to be our second to last episode for this season.
Mhm.
Next episode, we're going to do some more processing out loud with you all. We're actually going to be in a conversation with each other and answer some questions that have come up throughout this podcasting time. We're going to share that with you. We are then going to take some distance away from the weekly shows and give ourselves some space to just process and pause and heal and realign ourselves with each other and in this work, because that is a part of the journey. Always time needed to realign and get back in it.
This is the portion of the podcast that's all about action.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
we feel strongly that folks are with us in the understanding that pausing is an action step,
Mm-hmm.
incubating is an action step,
Mm-hmm.
taking time off the grid to really do the inner work. That is action work. It might not be outward facing, performative, external work with the
Right.
world.
Right.
It's, I would argue, some of the most important work.
So,
And we
yeah.
found that
Yeah.
it's been transformative for this work and for ourselves. It just feels like the right thing to do.
It does. And I think I enjoy personally sitting in silence. I think I hear some of the greatest insights that my mind has when I turn noise down and I let myself just be with nature, be in silence, be out of the routine of busy, busy, busy. And I realize that last statement that I just said is a privilege to be able to say. I have done enough practicing, but I also have a job that allows me to have a summer. I'm going to use it. I am going to use it so that I can then come back into the world to do more healing and more greatness with both myself, but also with our audience.
Yeah, with you all. And we'll come back in the fall in September. So we're going to take the summer to incubate and to connect and to really ground ourselves in you all's feedback, really your comments, your questions, your connections, your ideas for options and conversations and all the things. So there's a lot to let marinate in that spirit. I think we just really feel it is such an honor and a gift to get to be in your earbuds or on your speakerphone. We just feel so lucky to get to be in your world and to be a part of this journey with
Mhm.
you.
It means the world to us, and I'll speak for myself, to me, to know that there are people out there listening to us and gaining insight and or hearing new questions come up in their own mind just from something we might have said, and are then going to take those things out into the world and do good with it. That is a beautiful gift. And I don't take that lightly at all. And I'm so, so thankful for you all as listeners, and for the listeners who haven't shared anything with us. Just the fact that you're listening is a gift to us. And we thank you for that.
Yeah.
And to the listeners who have said things to us, we do truly, truly, truly appreciate it.
Yeah.
It is nice to know, even if it's not always a celebratory message, that is helpful. That gives us great insight to even be have the mirror held up for us. What a great gift you give us in those moments. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your mind with
Mhm.
us. We are so, so, so thankful.
So we'll be excited to have our last episode with you all next week. As we close out for this week, we invite you to just connect with yourself and notice where you've been feeling you need to slow down. Where
Mm.
have you found that you are getting a little bit attached to certain plans or things that you think feel like you need to do or produce? When have you found yourself attached, but also a little bit of resistance with that attachment? And where do you feel ready to shift a little bit and be a
Mhm.
little more agile and flow with, I'm learning something here. And even though I did dedicate and like invest a lot of time in that, the lesson is what matters.
Mm.
What would happen if I pivoted? What would happen? We invite you to share those things with us and let us know if you had any connections. This is kind of a different style of an episode. We're just truly processing out loud.
Yeah, let us know and share those reflections with the person you're listening to this with, but also share it with us. The more we learn from you all, the better it gets.
Yeah,
And we're going to have some time to just let the things sink in that we have learned. And so keep giving us more to let sink in, because
that's
that's going to
right.
be a powerful tool to give us. And so
That's right.
we appreciate you all
That's right.
and look forward to closing out with you all next week.
Until then.
Sending you all love and light.
Thanks for joining us today, y'all. We'd love to stay connected on Instagram and Facebook, so you can find us at Two Wives and a Spark, all spelled out.
If you enjoyed today's episode, share it with a friend so we can keep the sparks of connection going. If you want access to our episodes as soon as they drop, click that subscribe button. Every rating and review helps others find us, so thank you in advance for letting us know what you think.
And special shout out to Journey Girl Magic Productions.
I'm Leah.
And I'm Rachel.
Thank you for listening to Two Wives and a Spark.